So in your opinion, in what ways is Hardline going to be a significantly different experience from what Battlefield 4 can offer players? Because when you originally showed the game at E3, it was multiplayer, which is what I think most Battlefield players care about, which was cool. But on the surface, a lot of people saw it and just went, "Oh, it's a mod. It looks like a reskin." So, in your opinion, how is this game a different experience from Battlefield 4?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of different things that make it a different experience. We could start with the 5 all-new game modes that we've created that the teams worked really hard to develop and create that are very unique and never been seen in Battlefield before. We could talk about the setting, the fact that you are playing cops and criminals. A lot of the suggestions that the community is making that we're rolling in, like the asymmetrical weapons. We're putting a focus on esports to try to attract more esports people and support those guys because they really want Battlefield to be a competitive thing. So we're trying to lean into that. And that's just on the multiplayer side. Then there's a whole other side of the game that we haven't talked a ton about, which is our single player campaign, which is very different than anything you've seen in Battlefield before. I talked a little bit about the storytelling approach, but the way that we're handling the cinematics, the way that we're developing the characters, the way that the episodes are structured, the player choice that people will have, the kind of difference between the straight linear kind of progression that you've seen in previous Battlefields, allowing people to kind of open it up and take the encounters in different ways, I think is very different. Overall, I feel like what we're creating is a significant entry for the franchise, and we hope people see it that way when they get to see and play it. One of the challenges with the way that we announced the game, to your point, is not everybody understands what a beta is, and so some people think of a beta, like maybe just because I've been in making games for so long, a beta as a sample of something with the intent of getting information to improve it. And then I think some players these days that are new to hearing things like beta think it's a demo and think it's the finished version of the game and this is what the game is. And while people played it, some people, to your point, may have thought, oh, it's a reskin, or, oh man, this sucks, there's only 2 game modes in 1 map. It's like, well guys, there's actually 7 game modes, 9 multiplayer maps, a whole single player campaign, unique story, different weapons, new vehicles, esports modes. I mean, there's just tons of stuff that I'm really happy to talk about and excited and proud of what the team's doing. So, all I could say is I hope more people get a chance to play it or see it or learn about it from things like your channel, and that would really give them a chance to try it.
Where did the idea for Battlefield Hardline come from? Like, what was the inception of it? What's the reason that Battlefield Hardline is a thing, I guess?
Sure. So, how you doing, Jack? Thanks for talking to me today. Hi, everybody. So, the way Hardline came to be, it was actually a few years ago. I was at an event for EA in Barcelona, and I met Carl Magnus from DICE for the first time. And he was a fan of the Dead Space series that our team had made, and many of us are big Battlefield fans. So we were just talking at this meeting, and we just started talking about each other's games, and then I was just saying it was pretty cool how Battlefield, one of the things that I liked about Battlefield was it changed from era to era. So it was like 1942, Vietnam, they had the Secret Weapons expansion, they had 2142, they like jumped around so much, but they always had the really great multiplayer, the really great rock, paper, scissors multiplayer of the series. And I just thought that was really cool, and that was refreshing as a developer to get to kind of change from one thing to the next. Being in the Dead Space world for so many years, we'd made 4 of those games, and it was more of the same kind of thing. Of course, progressing the story, but thematically and visually, we were kind of sticking to the same thing. So being able to jump from era to era in Battlefield was really appealing and interesting. And I was just asking him, is that really fun? Because you can kind of experiment and try different things. And he said, yes, it was really cool. And then we just started talking about other ideas for Battlefield. And we were just talking about, hey, it'd be cool if there was like a cops and robbers Battlefield. That seems like something that would be cool. Instead of war on the battlefield out in the middle of the Middle East or something, you could do war in the streets, you know, between cops and criminals. And he kind of chuckled and said, well, we had talked about that a few years ago, actually. We had kind of the same idea. And so that was kind of how we started talking about it. And then he just mentioned, you know, would you guys want to work on a Battlefield game? And my initial reaction was, yeah, that'd be super cool. Are you kidding? And he said, no, it's like, you know, you guys are a great developer. We like what you do. It'd be interesting to see what another studio inside of the company would do with the franchise. So that's kind of how it started. But before we jumped in, you know, obviously we were just like, whoa, well, we just can't go off and make a game. You know, we haven't really worked with Frostbite. We don't, you don't know all the intricacies of making a Battlefield. Maybe we should do some sort of intermediate step. And, you know, they were doing the premium for Battlefield 3 at the time. And we wound up taking on and doing the Endgame expansion for Battlefield 3. So that was the one where we brought in the motorcycle, you know, we built that, air superiority, a bunch of different things that we brought to the franchise with that expansion. And that was received fairly well by the community. They seemed to like it a lot. And that was kind of like a great test to see if we knew what it would take to work on what has been the most important part of Battlefield, which is multiplayer. And so once we kind of had that under our belts, then we really started talking more about the concept and what we could do with a cops and robbers style game. What would that mean? And then really exploring some ideas for single player, which had been kind of our specialty with the Dead Space series. So that's kind of how it all started.
In terms of just the game itself, like from your perspective, what's the USP, the unique selling point of Battlefield Hardline? If I'm a Battlefield fan or a new player to the series, why am I going to want to play this game?
Ooh, that's a tough question. Well, I think there's probably like 4 big things to us that we talk about being very important for our game. Number 1 is player choice, making sure that the player always has an opportunity to do what they want. So in single player, really opening up the story component of it and going away from the more linear based type of games you've seen in most first-person shooters. So giving players a lot of different variety, whether it's attacking things non-lethally, being more of a precision player, using gadgets, or just being a run and gun character. We want to make sure that happens. And then in multiplayer, we also wanted to make sure people felt like they were contributing to the team all the time in their own way, whether it was being a really great sniper or, you know, being an awesome driver. We wanted to make sure players had opportunities to kind of play it the way that they wanted and still lean into the importance of Battlefield, which is team play and strategy, but also not be quite so punitive to people that maybe were new. So we did things like adding the health pack ability, so somebody could run up to you and get a health pack from you instead of you having to drop it down. You can still drop it down, but maybe you're a new player and you don't know how to do that particular thing yet. Other more seasoned players can come up to you and get healed or get ammo or something like that. And we thought that that would just, again, let people kind of play the way that they wanted to a bit more. The other thing that I think is really critical for our game is the way we're trying to approach our storytelling. So again, in single player and in multiplayer, we're trying to like fuse this idea of TV crime dramas and real world news and things like that you see on TV to kind of wrap everything in that type of fiction. So as you're playing multiplayer, for instance, when you're loading into a map, you kind of get context of what's going on, right? So like in our E3 beta, for instance, you kind of saw, you know, there was a heist in progress in downtown Los Angeles, and we tried to like set things up so that the maps and modes made sense and were relevant, and you had an understanding of what you were doing based on kind of the fiction of the setting. And then in single player, we wanted to kind of take a lot of cues from TV in terms of instead of just using one stationary camera for cutscenes like you've seen in some of the previous Battlefields, we're doing a lot more with different camera cuts, showing the player character, investing a lot into the story. And the way that we've broken the levels down is into episodes. So each episode kind of has its own little mini story, like a TV show. Like you get, you know, one installment of the show and you kind of get a nice contained story that may lead into the next story. So that's another one. I'd say the third one, which isn't really a unique selling point for us, but I think is a great unique selling point for Battlefield, is part of what makes the game great is what the players do. And that's, you know, kind of what we're calling the only in Battlefield moments. You know, when you see somebody like rig up a tank with a ton of C4 and blow it and make it fly on top of a building. That's crazy. Like we never thought people would do stuff like that. And making sure that we give people the ability to do that in that Battlefield playground is really important. And so while that's not a new idea to the franchise, it's something that we as a development team want to make sure is there for the community. So I'd say those are three major things for us.
Now, obviously the game was delayed. It was supposed to be out this fall. What was the main reason behind that? Just improving the quality, or have you gone back to the drawing board and added a few new features based on the feedback from the beta?
Yeah, so the delay was a big deal for us because we kind of came out at E3 and we had been talking to guys like you and some other folks in the community before E3 to get feedback, because you guys know what's good in Battlefield and we want to make sure we're doing the right stuff. And then when we were going to put the beta out, we thought, we thought a couple things. One, instead of just announcing the game, we wanted to announce it and let people play it. Two, we wanted to do that so we could get feedback, find out what the community thinks, find out what maybe some newer people to the franchise think, find out what the veterans think. And then lastly, we wanted to prove to ourselves we could launch it stably and have stability with that launch, because that's really important to the franchise. So the game was stable at E3, which was great. We had a great beta. We got a ton of feedback, both from you guys and the rest of the people in the beta. And when we got all that feedback, we kind of said, okay, wait a minute, now we have all this great feedback, we don't have a lot of time to do anything with it. So one of the things that's been changing at EA as a company is, our CEO, Andrew, really wants to infuse kind of the concept of player first throughout the company. So as an organization, we're thinking about what the players think and what they want, which is, I think important, because that's what matters, the people playing the game. So we talked to him and said, hey, we got all this great feedback and this is what the players are saying, but given the time we have, we can't act on it right now. Some of it we can, but some of it we just can't. And Andrew and the company said, you know what, it's important that you guys do the best that you can. Now, obviously we're not going to do everything the community says, because a lot of the time they're, different opinions. Some parts want one thing, some parts want another, and that's where the designers come in and really think about and figure out how to account for, the bulk of what the community says or what we think they want. And so the company agreed that, hey, take the time to try to incorporate more of the feedback. And so, from E3, from Gamescom, from today at EGX, we continue to get great feedback. We also get feedback on our forums. We also continue to have a relationship with folks like yourself. And we're looking at that, and our lead multiplayer designer, Thad, is engaging with you guys and posting on his blog and letting you guys know what we're up to. So it's been really good, and I think that's going to help us not only from a quality perspective, but also gives us more time to just, improve the game overall. Just the quality, the stability, everything.
Okay. So the delay hasn't necessarily has it given you time to add new features that you hadn't considered beforehand, or?
Yeah, the delay has done that, and again, some of that could be from feedback from you guys, from the community. Certainly in single player, we've added a couple new features, and in multiplayer, we've done some tweaks and additions based on that feedback. So it's good to get the time, but I think the most important thing is to make sure we release a stable and solid game. Sometimes developers get into trouble when they just start jamming more and more stuff in. That actually can lead to instability, bugs, and it can get messy. So, part of my job is kind of making sure we don't go crazy and try to do too much in the time that we have.
Based on the multiplayer, one thing I noticed from playing the game in various different settings, there doesn't seem to be that much destruction in the multiplayer game, and obviously the Frostbite engine and the Battlefield games sort of they pride themselves on that, especially since it's a game like Bad Company. And one thing I thought would be cool, when you go into interiors in the multiplayer levels, are we going to see like a more robust destruction system than what we saw in the beta? Because it really felt to me, and a lot of other community members, that was a feature that was missing, especially from the downtown map. Like, are there other levels in the game that will feature maybe some of that micro destruction that we saw like in Battlefield 3 Close Quarters? They did it back then in levels like Azadi Palace, for example. Is that something that you guys have got in Battlefield Hardline? And I mean, do you think that's going to work out well for Battlefield players?
Absolutely. So, I really enjoyed Bad Company 2 quite a bit, and I love the kind of apple coring that would happen in the buildings where you could kind of chew through walls and create different entry points and just have really cool firefights in kind of close quarter situations. We absolutely have that, and it's just the maps that we've shown so far are kind of the bigger maps, and like today we're showing our Glades map with Hotwire. So you don't have a lot of those interior moments, but we absolutely do have the interior micro destruction you're talking about, and I think that's a really hugely important part of Battlefield. So yeah, we definitely have that, and I think it's a lot of fun. I personally really like the close combat stuff, so we're definitely working on that. We have that in the game.
Okay, and a lot of feedback that you guys got, well, feedback that I saw anyway, people wanted you to experiment with asymmetric weaponry in the multiplayer game. Like, are we going to see that? What's your opinion on that? And do you think it's something that can be balanced in a game as big as Battlefield?
Yeah, so that was one of the big things coming out of the beta, like you said. And it was surprising to me because my concern initially was if somebody loves a weapon and they're playing the criminal side, and then the round ends they have to play the cop side, they would have felt like we took something away from them if we didn't give them the same weapons on both sides. Well, it turns out, coming out of the beta, people actually really liked faction-specific weapons. So we've gone ahead and done that in the game. And so Thad and the guys have been working on that balance to make sure that people have that. Listening to what people say, I think there's certain people that like the fact that it changes because it gives them another thing to kind of progress through when they play the different sides. So yeah, we put that in. It was kind of a surprise that people actually wanted it, but that was something that we could listen to you guys and implement.
Yeah, I just think it's, like in a game like Counter-Strike, when, say you're playing as terrorists and you find a silenced M4 on the ground, you pick it up and maybe you win a clutch or something, it just gives you a nice buzz. It's like, I can't buy this weapon, I can't use it at the moment, but if I find one, it's just going to give me that little thrill for a round or two or whatever. I personally think that'll be really cool to see that again in a Battlefield game, because if I remember correctly, Battlefield 2 actually had asymmetric weapons. And it worked out pretty well then. So it's pretty cool that you guys have actually taken that feedback on board and you are going along with that now. I wanted to ask as well about the premium service coming from Battlefield Hardline. Can you talk all about that?
We're not really talking about that right now, so maybe try one more question.
Could you describe Battlefield Hardline in 3 words?
Really, really fun.
That's a pretty good answer. Thank you very much.
All right, cool. Thanks.
That was great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah, it was good questions. Thank you.